Yes, thank you for being here, and thank you for this great introduction. Actually, you've done most of my work already. So what we have here is a very interdisciplinary panel, and so just as a way of bringing you into the topic, I just want to say a few words about me and then about what we will be talking about. So as you've heard, I'm the events and program manager for BIOTOPIA, which is a new kind of life science museum that's currently being planned here in Munich. It's going to be in the west of the city at Nymphenburg Palace. And what we will be doing at BIOTOPIA is really taking the Museum of Natural History and Natural Sciences into the 21st century. So we will talk a bit about the past, but not so much anymore, and really take it into the present and also the future, which is quite a revolutionary thing for museums. And how will we do that? Well, we will focus on behaviors and activities that we as human beings share with other living organisms, such as animals, plants, microorganisms. And one of these behaviors is eating. So food and eating is very important to us. And of course, eating can be a lot of things. So at its basic level, it's about taking nutrients in. So it's a necessity for us and other living organisms. But beyond that, it's also, it has cultural implications. It's about rituals. It has aspects of social contacts. It's about sustainability, but it's also about politics and ethics, of course. So I brought you this just to exemplify it. You've probably had it downstairs. So this is the American pretzel, right? I've seen a couple of people. If you're not from Munich, you should really have one before you leave. You cannot leave without eating a pretzel. So this is a very important foodstuff to Bavaria and also to Germany. And what I just briefly want to talk about is, if you look at it as on the surface, we could talk about what goes into it, the ingredients. So it's wheat, malt, salt, no sugar, I hope, but some fat, actually, water and yeast. But if you really look at it closer, we could also talk about its cultural symbolism, for Bavaria particularly. We could also talk about questions of biodiversity or loss of biodiversity in terms of the grains that go into it. And we could also talk about maybe even aesthetics and all of these different things. And of course, also about business and technologies. And again, for the international visitors amongst us, one word you should take home is the Brezel-Schlingmaschine. It's a great German word. And that's actually the robot that does this unique twist that makes up the pretzel. So really, this is just to show the range of issues that we can talk about when we think about just any foodstuff that we consume on a daily basis, at least in Bavaria. And so with this, I want to lead over to our panel. I'm not going to, I guess, introduce you again because that has already been said. So we start with Zack, who has been working on a lot of projects sort of at the intersection of research and aesthetics and art and design, thinking about we as humans change our food systems. So thank you for being here, Zack, and I'll leave the stage to you if you want to come up there.
Thank you, Nina. So I'm going to talk quickly about other food futures, which I will call food futures that are biodiverse, beautiful, and just. And I think digital technology and life sciences have a role to play in those futures, but they won't necessarily get us to the futures that we want, which are presumably more beautiful, often more biodiverse, and definitely more just than the ones we have today. So as Nina said, my name is Zack Denfeld. I run a research organization called the Center for Genomic Gastronomy, which was co-founded with Kat Kramer. And what we often do is bring together artists, scientists, chefs, and biohackers to prototype alternative culinary futures. So those futures today I want to tell you about are the other food futures, but other than what? Other than the same tired futures we've been heard about for a decade. So we've been doing this for 10 years, and we get invited to these conferences or we asked to do exhibitions. And we were told, you need to talk about insects, 3D printed food, and in vitro meats. Sometimes something about Internet of Things in the kitchen, and maybe some GMOs or CRISPR. And we've dealt with all those things, but after a decade, we're wondering if they're really getting us where we need to go. And I think our futures are much messier and more interesting and much stranger than these technologies. So back in 2010, to sort of test this hypothesis, we shot a cooking show called the Glowing Sushi Cooking Show, where we wanted to cook with the only transgenic or genetically modified animal that you could legally buy at that time, which was a transgenic zebrafish. And don't forget, this is well before CRISPR even existed. It's much easier now to do this just in our home bio kitchen. And our goal with this show was to move beyond the overblown promises and perils of GMOs. The idea at that time being that GMOs would either, save humanity from starvation or were the devil's work and scientists were playing God. So instead, we just wanted to get our hands on a GMO and cook with it and see what we could do with it in the kitchen. In this case, we had to make sushi because if we cooked the fish, we would have denatured the proteins that were making them fluoresce. So that's why we chose sushi as our dish. And as we kind of look around the world and see some of the utopias of the internet crashing around us, it's probably a good time to imagine the good, bad, and ugly of our biotech revolution. And so this show generated a lot of conversation online. And if you want to go look at the YouTube comments, they are very funny and disturbing. One thing we may also want to consider when we're inventing our new food systems and food technologies are unexpected ingredients. And so I'm thinking of things like the microplastics that we're increasingly finding in fish stomachs, some of the chemicals that are in our food system we don't want, and in this case, smog, air pollution. So we've been going around the world since 2012 harvesting and distilling smog, in this case, Bangalore, India, and letting people taste the terroir of their local environments. And actually, it hugely influences how we taste the world. And it's an ingredient that's actually in a lot of our dishes that we should start writing into recipes because it changes our perception of food and it changes our health. So this is one thing we should consider in our futures that we're not considering now. I'll just share one other quick project and leave you with a hopeful note. I'm an artist primarily, that's my background, and one of the things I think artists can do is shift perspective. I had an unexpected death in my family about 3 years ago, and I kept telling myself in my head, well, he's going to become worm food. He's going to become worm food, which I guess is a thing that atheists repeat when they have a death in their family. But I took that to heart, and I had all these tears while I was grieving, and I was wondering, what can I do with these tears? And I read a paper about a Thailand moth that drinks the tears of mammals. And I thought, I'm so ready to be harvested. I have all these tears to give to this moth. Why won't it come to me? And so we were inspired by this in our research organization and started thinking and asking, what do we taste like to the organisms that eat us? Little pieces of us every day, the microorganisms that live on us, and then the decomposers that eat all of us when we eventually die. So we started building an experimental restaurant where we could test some of these questions. And I'm happy to say that we have our first small version of the restaurant up right now in Eindhoven in the Netherlands. Here you can come and feed your dead skin cells to Garuda fish. They will then process those and make a nutrient-rich broth that will feed some plants in an aquaponics system, which you can eventually eat again too. And I've been told that people have a very a slightly spiritual experience when they do this. So it's maybe a way of putting ourselves back into the food system and acknowledging that we too are food. So just to conclude, if we only take these technologies as our food of the future, I'd imagine we'd have a 3D printed in vitro burger on maybe a bun that's made out of cricket powder, and that it would be all made by an automated robot, and we wouldn't have to talk to a single human in the whole process. That sounds deeply depressing to me. I think we can do better than that. And it's not that these foods are too radical for consumers now. They're not radical enough. They're still treating food primarily as fuel. And I think it's a very engineering and tech approach that we can maybe add some more culture and joy to. So food is more than fuel. It is a system that connects us. It connects us to the ecosystem we live in. It connects us with other human beings and the cultures that we exist in. And our technologies and visions of technology should reflect that. So it's not so important to me whether you're using CRISPR, transgenesis, you're doing plant breeding or agroecology. These are just paintbrushes to get us to a better vision of the future, and those visions are where I think we could really do a lot of work. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Zach, very much for this very inspiring opening talk and also keeping to the time. That was quite ambitious. So next up, I promised you a very interdisciplinary panel. So we move now a little bit more into science, and Ophelia Deroy from LMU here in Munich will tell you a little bit about her work. She's working on how we perceive food, what the neuroscientific findings tell us about it. And when we prepared this, she just briefly described the brain to me as an expectation machine, which I found very intriguing. So I'm looking forward to hearing more about it. Thank you.
Okay, so I've raised expectations. So I wanted to ask you first what you think has become the most socially acceptable form of porn online. And of course, because of the panel, you might guess this is indeed this kind of behavior that you might have witnessed yesterday at dinner or even indulged in yourself. As of last year, these were the number of hashtags for food and food porn that you could find on the platform Instagram. And we all know this behavior, but what I want to encourage us to think about is why. Why do we do it, or why do others do it? A good reason to ask ourselves why is not just satisfying our curiosities, because it's very important to realize that when faced with these two kinds of information, say about the restaurant you will want to go to tonight, which one do you think you will be more convinced by? The one on the upper right or the one on the lower left? Okay, I hope we agree here. What is interesting is that a lot of the current efforts are going on the upper right side at the moment. People are developing new ways of aggregating judgments, refining categories, getting more data, this kind of abstract information. And why? Because it's easy to aggregate. But the one on the lower left is hard to aggregate. You can't combine people's Instagram's pictures and just understand what is the perfect look of something. The fact that we follow, on the other hand, from the lower left, the picture, the appeals of images for food as in other places in our digital lives is a bit irrational, it seems. Why? Because the information on the right is much, much more reliable. It comes from 500, thousands of people. It has subcategories. You can dig into it. The other picture is probably modified, maybe the TripAdvisor's ratings as well, but it is also just coming from one person. Why do we trust it? Well, we trust it so much because food has a very special power, and images in general, on our brains. So what we do in the lab is to compare the response of the brain where people are looking at food pictures versus non-food. The food is not present. This is just the power of an image that you know you cannot eat. And yet what we find is activation in that part of the brain called the insula that codes for the taste of the food. So you anticipate how the food will taste like, even if it's inaccessible. The second part of the brain is in the orbitofrontal cortex, which actually is a part of the brain that is active for pleasure, reward. So not only you anticipate, you do this prediction machine for the taste, but also the pleasure you will derive from eating it, even though you really know you won't. So the question becomes, what can we do with this? And I want to suggest that we have here a very specific signatures for food, but also something which a lot of research is going to. The signatures are specific to individuals, different cultures, people with obesity, people with eating disorders, that we can really try and sort of understand food preference through. Now, at the moment, I want also you to reflect on the following, so that every time you post something on the social media as a picture, you're performing an experiment on yourself. You're going through all these filters, trying to look at what works best, what is most rewarding. That's that part of your brain and this anticipation you're playing with. What the rest of the industry then does is that they try and sort of use what you have selected and collect big data to see which one of these pictures collects more likes or retweets. But what we can do in the lab is something that uses this in a more systematic way. What we do then is sort of play all the variants, the one that people haven't necessarily been able to select through intuitions. So we take the same quantity, for instance, here of food, and we dispose it differently to see who prefers which one. We can also sort of play with subtle orientation. And here, this is one of the discovery, for instance, that we have done. People don't really like food where the line comes toward themselves. It's too aggressive. We are trying to figure out some other rules. People prefer odd number of things in the plate, that even number, and so on and so forth. So we can get at the rules and principles through this experiment. It has some economic consequences. This is an experiment that I conducted with colleagues in Oxford. This is the same food. You can see it, different part of the plates. We asked people how much they were ready to pay for these different plates. And these are the results. So just if you're not convinced by the ethical or the aesthetic argument, this is an economic one. You can make much more money if you actually tap into these rules. Of course, now you might say, well, it's great, and there are lots of challenges. Of course, there are 3D printed foods now, and we can design maybe foods that make us think about our position in the universe, like the spiral is supposed to make you feel like it's a dessert that was designed for this. And it can sort of help chefs to raise to notoriety and become celebrity chef. Maybe it's good because these chefs then can actually change our food behavior somehow, make us more respectful, or do things for children in school. But this might still look to you a bit like first world problems. What I want to suggest is that by harnessing the power of images, the power of food pictures, and the science behind it, we can also solve some of our future problems. One thing I've been working on is actually the question of how we will integrate new foods and new sources of proteins. As we heard just, there is one big challenge that is facing the Western world is the protein sources. And we will need, it seems, at least to consider integrating insects into our food. Now, for a Western palate, this is not a solution. Insects are a great source of protein, which is enjoyed and appreciated visually in other parts of the world. It was in Europe in the Middle Ages, but we've lost that visual culture. We can't actually see this right now and feel like this is something that is tasty or indeed rewarding. It's actually the reverse in your brain. So what can you do? Well, the solution here is to say, well, we will hide the insect content in the products and we'll just put it on the label and then be very pedagogical with everybody to sort of convince them this is a good thing. And I'm sorry here, it's not the right way forward, not because it's not ethically right to be going through this abstract information, but people don't read the labels. So at the end, with that kind of transparency, we are not serving the design of informing people. What the internet needs, and we have to reflect on this, is the power, harness the power of images. It's not just transparency onto abstract information, it's visibility. And that's, for instance, one dish we have worked on, is to try and progressively make insects more appealing, just little by little, to make people use and therefore integrate this into something that when they see it, they expect a good taste and they feel that they anticipate reward. Thank you for your attention.
Is the clicker on the clicker's over there?
Thank you, Ophelia. So we're moving on now. So far, you've heard talks that sort of are under the assumption that food is readily available or easily available, and that we sort of have the luxury, as you've hinted at, Ophelia, to think about the taste, also the aesthetics about food. But Hila Cohen now from the World Food Program Innovation Accelerator will obviously add a very important dimension to this panel now and to our discussions about food when speaking about world hunger and how they tackle it and helping people in very challenging environments. Welcome, Hila.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. My name is Hila, and I'm from the United Nations World Food Program Innovation Accelerator. I'm going to address food from one of its most challenging aspects, which is hunger. Today, 1 in 9 people on this planet are hungry. It means that they don't have access to food in a manner that is enough in terms of calories or nutrition, enough to feed them on a daily basis. WFP tries to solve this with its extensive supply chain operations. On a daily basis, we bring food to some of the most challenging places on the planet with a fleet of 5,000 trucks, 80 aircrafts, and 20 ships. In addition, we're looking more and more into distribution of cash so families can decide what they buy for their families. And in 2018, that was more than 1 billion of cash that we process around the world. We also support smallholder farmers that some researchers say that even though they're big contributors to the food system, they're some of the hungriest people on the planet. If we look at DLD as looking at also the optimistic aspects of this challenge, the good news is that even though the number of people on the planet is growing, the number of hungry people is decreasing. But still, if we look at all the technology advances that we have today, does it make sense that there's still 821 million hungry people in 2019? Some forecasts say that by 2030, the numbers should go down to around 500 million. But the question is, can innovation bring the numbers even down low to zero hunger? So this is what we are. I'm part of the Innovation Accelerator of the World Food Program. And what we try to do is to make innovation operational for WFP in our field operations. So what we do is we look for startups from around the world that have solutions in the food systems realm for developing countries. So if you know of any startups that are in the realm of food tech, ag tech, AI, blockchain, please tell them to apply to our accelerator. We also run boot camps. This is a 5-day program here in Munich, Germany. We really focus on human-centered design, understanding the user, because many times people assume they know the user, but I really want to address that every innovation, even in developing countries, you need to know your user. We've run boot camps together with Singularity University, Google Launchpad, and in May, one of our next boot camps is going to be with Cargill. We also provide funding to startups, and this is we give up to $100,000. The good news for them is that we don't take equity, and the funding is intended to run a pilot with WFP in our field operations in developing countries around the world. Our key focus for 2019 is also scaling innovations. I wanted to share you, as we are at DLD, a few digital solutions that we have. WFP has one of the biggest implementations of blockchain in the humanitarian realm. Today, we're supporting more than 100,000 refugees with our building block system. We've also have Share the Meal, which is an app where you can micro-donate to the global operations of WFP from 50 cents and up. And also we've created a Yelp for refugees in Lebanon. So once they get the cash from WFP, they can optimize the food basket that they buy from their families. I wanted to bring an additional example in a bit more detail, and this is H2Grow. This is a hydroponics system that we're developing, and each time we bring it to a new community, we make sure to adapt it to the local community. Hydroponics is when you grow food, you don't need soil, you just need less water than for regular farming and minerals. We started this project in Peru, in the arid slums of Lima. And there, we initially wanted to help female members grow salads for their families. It was a great pilot, we learned a lot, but then we wanted to bring it to the Sahara Desert. You can see here that the livestock is grazing on local garbage. If you imagine that this is what the livestock is eating, think what the nutrients that the families are getting if their goats eat trash. So we started with a pilot. We wanted to bring the latest tech into the Sahara Desert, and we brought this old shipping container, and we repurposed it. It had LED lighting and solar panels, and it could grow that, you see that tray, that grows in a week from barley seedlings, water, and minerals. We thought, is this scalable? Well, A, that was one thing we had to think about, and B, you're also saying, why are you growing food, barley? Is that good for human consumption? So as I mentioned before, talking to the user, we really realized that the local community said, we want you to feed our livestock, not us, using hydroponics. And that's why we were growing barley for the goats. We started, as I mentioned, with a high-tech solution, but then we realized it wasn't scalable. And we actually created a localized version of this hydroponic system at 10% of the cost, with materials sourced locally, with the help of Taleb, an engineer that grew up in this refugee camp. And even though it was 10% of the cost, it still had 60% of the output of the high-tech solution. So if I can summarize and also share with you our ask is that, A, always remember that innovation needs to be designed closely with your user regardless where you are. And second, we're looking for partners and startups to help us disrupt hunger and help us end global hunger on this planet. Thank you.
Thank you, Hila. We're just going to move on to our next and final talk before we get into a bit of a discussion, hopefully. So our last speaker on the panel is Amit Zoran. He's going to lead us into a very fascinating world that merges traditional cooking procedures with opportunities of the digital world and sort of questioning or maybe already establishing, I don't know, a quite new culture of gastronomy. So welcome, Amit.
Thank you. Thank you, Nina. Hello. So, yeah, I am a researcher at the Hebrew University of Jerusalem, and I would like to speak about digital gastronomy. What is it, why we do it, and how we do it. So first of all, digital gastronomy stands for the integration of digital fabrication facilities, 3D printers, laser machines, CNC machines, robots into the kitchen so that they can alter the way we think about cooking in general. Now, in my research lab, we focus on hybrids, how we can use digital technology together with traditional practice to create a new creative space. For example, this broken ceramic element that were restored with 3D printers. So, looking at my kitchen, this is a hybrid kitchen. We have CNC machine, we have a laser machine. Here you see 3D printing of a tofu structure. Here you see using laser machine to cut seaweed. We can also selectively heat food surfaces with a laser machine. 3D scanning a sweet potato. Or CNC milling a sweet potato to achieve shapes that will be very difficult to achieve in a traditional technologies. Now, recently, we start to use robot arms in the kitchen, and the vision is that these robot arms, this is only a concept design, will be part of our future kitchen. But the contribution or the main goal of this research is not about automation and not about machine. It's about giving chefs digital tool to recreate and rethink about creativity in the kitchen, because we believe that computers, also based on the challenges that Hila mentioned, will take a growing part in tomorrow's cooking. And we would like that chef will lead this revolution. But in order for chef to lead this revolution, we need to focus on what is the creative advantage that digital technology gives to chef. And the answer to that, from our perspective, is the ability to think in resolution of pixels and bits, to think about how we can control flavor patterns, position by position, and create patterns similar way that we think about digital photography, for example. So let's have a look at similar examples. Here you see a digital hybrid soup that we made. We use the parametric design in the left, a mathematical algorithmic design space, to clone several areas of the soup. For example, a carrot that we used, that we CNC, 3D printed tofu structure, laser cut seaweed to have this new soup. But the idea behind this soup is that we can use the noodle structure as a containers for sauce. So the chef can segregate the liquid of the stock and reassemble them based on personal preference. Algorithm generate a solution, a personal solution for each diner. Here you see a more advanced version of the same soup. So what each noodle container contains a special seasoning sauce. And in the bottom, you see what happens when we have more and more seasoning containers like that with a better resolution. We create a hybrid, a new, entirely new type of cooking where one dish can have infinite amount of variation to satisfy the requirement of the diner. Here you see a different direction. Based on a Maillard reaction, a reaction that occurs on the surface of food when you heat it, browning reaction, sometimes we call it. We use laser to add browning color to this meringue disc, but by that we also program the taste of the meringue disc. So we can take a pattern and apply it, in this case on a pavlova, to actually program the taste of the pavlova, and we can have infinite amount of taste for the same dish. A third direction is a programmable mold. We use molding and casting a lot in cooking, mostly in conditori. Here we program, this is only a concept design, the shape of a mold for casting a cake. Now, this is not a concept design, these specific are images. So we can have infinite amount of variation for the same dish. Using a discrete element in cooking is not new. And one thing that we are saying is that if we build models to use this type of things, we can harness the huge information and knowledge we have from algorithmic thinking and computer graphics and apply it into cooking. Here you see a simple dish that is a morphing between two dishes. Actually, it's a segregated tom yum soup that going directly into a dessert in a similar way that we can morph two photos in Photoshop. We need new algorithms, we need new models, we need new mathematics to describe that. We need to rethink about recipes and creativity when we want to apply digital technology to the kitchen, and this is the focus of the research that we do in my hybrid lab in Jerusalem. Thank you.
So, thank you, Amit. Thank you to the four of you. So we have actually 40 minutes, which is really good. So we can have a few points of discussion here, a few questions that I have prepared. So I want to go back to Zack and start with you, because I found it very interesting, like especially the project about the tiers is really transgressing boundaries in a way, which resonates with us at BIOTOPIA, because we're trying to sort of do a perspective shift. And if that doesn't do a perspective shift, then what does, right? So I was wondering, could you elaborate a little bit, also maybe from other projects that you have done, what do you really think can these speculative projects bring also to the discussions about food that are often very much about politics and sustainability and so on? Why is it worthwhile, even for business and entrepreneurs, to think in that direction that you're working?
Yeah. I mean, I think speculation and then sort of prototyping that speculation is one of the things that artists and designers can do. Presumably, we don't scale well. We talked a bit about this recently, like how do you get these people who are at the fringes to keep doing their work? But I think to flavor our tiers, one of this initial insight that I would love to be harvested because I don't need these tiers anymore, so could these moths please come drink them, led to all these other questions about the organisms that consume us. And so as we enter this microbiome era where we're starting to be able to analyze the microorganisms that live on our skin, in our guts, we need new metaphors. So we're hopefully moving away from the metaphors of the mid-century of the war on germs, and we're moving towards metaphors such as my body's maybe a zoo, or my body's a city, or my body's a restaurant. And who do I want to invite in, and who do I want to keep out? So I think that's a little bit of what artists can bring to this conversation, is a shift in perspective, but for us it's very important we go beyond just drawings, and we actually build these things, test them, and put our own bodies as artists and the bodies of our audience to interact with these. So when we feed people smog, their throats hurt. Like it's not, we're saying like, yes, you're eating concentrated smog. So that's also very important to us.
Mm-hmm. Well, actually, that is a good cue for my next question to Ophelia, because we just yesterday talked about what is it about food in the discussion about food that is maybe a little bit different from some of the other discussions on sustainability issues, and it has to do probably with the fact that it is so close to our bodies. And so I was wondering, in terms of your research, you talked about the sort of the dominance of the visual senses, and that's very important, also something we battle with almost in museums, because we kind of want to make people experience our world with all our senses, but the first thing they do is just see. So I was wondering, could you tell us a little bit from your work, the experiment that you do, how actually the visual sense works in collaboration with the other senses, or whether there are actually points where it gets twisted or distorted, or they sort of cross each other, like sound and so on. Could you talk about that a little bit?
Yes, sure. So I think actually this is no longer true that our digital life is visual centric. I think everybody is realizing that we need to think about the sounds, we need to think about tactile. So there's a lot of work at the moment to make, virtual reality also cannot just, if you think this is the future, it cannot just be visual. You need to integrate an unknown or ignore sense, which is your sense of balance and the vestibular sense, how we move in space. So it is very exciting to see that that's the multi-sensory nature of our everyday life is now getting there with our digital knives. But it is still true that the sense of vision is very special. You always hear the statistics about 50% of our brain is devoted to vision. It's actually not that accurate, but it works well as a way of stressing the importance of the sense of vision. But why is it so? It's not just an accident of evolution. It's because it's the best sense we have for expectations. That is, you are capable of identifying things, you're capable of tracking the movements of things, you can see very far, and as we acquire the standing position. So there are very good reasons. It's not just that we like pictures. And we have to just realize that information is one thing. Expectations about information is really what the brain does. And this is the kind of loop that we need to sort of integrate. And having talked to a few people here, I just think that what we do in universities and in science is a bit the same thinking. We need to think ahead, all of us, but we need to realize that actually what we do all the time as humans is that we think ahead, use our visions to anticipate what things will do to our other senses.
Okay, I'm going to move on to Hila because I found it very interesting when I prepared this session that I was thinking of what you would actually think about these other talks, and in the sense that I was wondering actually. We speak a lot about aesthetics, as I also said when I introduced you. I was wondering, in the work that you do, working also with the people on the ground in the field, because you mentioned rightly that it's very important to know the people who actually work with you there. And I noticed there are a lot of women, which is not surprising probably, but I was wondering, is there a place for something like aesthetics and emotions in the type of work that you do in the field and when you develop these projects, or is this very straightforward entrepreneurial work?
So I think we at the Accelerator really work on human-centered design. And so I think you have to understand the communities you're working with. You can't just assume that because they're hungry, any solution would work. And so I think that is where you have to think about all the elements of the solution you're thinking about. So it's not only about the technical elements. It's not that if you develop an app, it will be straight away adopted. You really need to understand the user. And I think those elements that you mentioned come with that journey. When you do the user journey, understanding the user, let's say, because if you solve a problem for someone in Southeast Asia or in Africa, it's going to be different. Even when I showed the hydroponics example, it needs to be adapted to the needs of the local communities, because they might decide that for us, we want to prioritize growing food for our families, or we want to prioritize growing food for our livestock. Or there's certain circumstances like security, where in some cases women need to walk long distances that are not so safe for them, and they would prefer to have not a communal solution, but a hydroponic solution in their huts. So all these elements, when you do human-centered design, are critical as well.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Right. All right, so Amit, I want to come back to your talk and your topic and to these wildly beautiful images that you showed us. So I was wondering, also when you showed that picture of your kitchen lab, I don't know what you would call it more, is it a hybrid? It's a hybrid, that's what you said. So what struck me was that obviously food is involved, but really it's also a lot about the process of cooking, of preparing the food, of bringing technology and food, organic stuff together. So I was wondering, what's your take on what's going to happen next in the sense of how important will cooking as a preparation, as an act, stay in the future? Because at the same time, we always hear about how less and less people actually cook at home, at least on a daily basis. So how important is the act of dealing with foodstuffs in your work, but also what do you envision for the future?
Well, how important it is, I don't know. It's a cultural question. But in my research, what we study is the integration of analytic modes of creativity with intuitive one, cultural one, traditional one, and how they can live together. And the system and the technology that we build, the idea behind them is to allow a wider spectrum of human creativity to be engaged in the making part. So I do hope and believe that people, creative people, will always continue to be involved in the process and hack processes. And even if I develop a closed system for a computer, people will come and hack it. This is part of human creativity. But in the same time, I would like to mostly create a vision how both modes of creativity, the computational one, analytic one, mathematical one, can be integrated into tradition and live the, and I believe the vision itself is important because it helps to promote this balanced modes of creative practice between the old and the new and so on. Usually we'd like to go to extreme and say, I don't want this traditional thing, or I hate technology. And this is not the way to go if you want to create a sustainable vision.
Great, thank you. So we have 3 minutes left, and I think we're just going to finish with a question posed to all of you. So maybe we can just do a quick round and do quick answers, because I was wondering, just very intuitively, what do you think, or what is your worst fear for the future of food? But also, on the theme of optimism, what is your greatest hope for future food?
Well, I'm an agent of creativity, so I would like to see prosperity of culture and food culture instead of going to corporate controlled food.
Ophelia?
I think my fear is what people used to dream of in the 70s, that the solution is a kind of very nutritious pill that looks like absolutely nothing, and that this is what we should try and do. And my hope is that, a bit like what was discussed, that we realize that this area of food preferences are important, expressing and realizing ourselves through preferences in general, but in food in particular, is actually something that is not specific to privileged country or just, expressed at a very high level in art. It's something you find in a very basic, everyday part of the world, where people want to choose and to have food that looks good and that they're happy to share.
My hope is that as we move away from extreme globalization and we relocalize in this moment in history, it looks like, that places and food cultures become more distinguished and different again. And when you go somewhere new, you feel that way because you taste differently there, you smell differently, and it's not all the same McDonald's the world over. My great fear is that as we put up these new walls and borders, people run away from the amazing things that have happened through our sharing across cultures. And so I have a deep fear of like culinary eugenics, where you have these white nationalists chugging milk because they say they've evolved differently. This happened recently, right? That's deeply disturbing. So it's a critical time to rethink these food cultures, for sure.
My fear is that that we continue having unequal access to food for different people around the world. And I think my sense of optimism is that our sector of work finds new ways to partner with diverse actors and stakeholders in food systems in order to solve these grand challenges of ending global hunger. I think there's a lot of creativity, innovation come in, but also new ways of collaboration that can help that.
All right. Thank you. Well, we have 18 seconds left, so that gives me just a bit of time to leave you with a bit of an appetizer. So we will actually talk about food a lot at the first BIOTOPIA festival that is happening this year at Schloss Nymphenburg and the surroundings on May 25th and 26th. So please just put that in your calendar if you're around and spread the word. And if you want to know more about it, then just visit our website at biotopia.net. Have to do that promo too, of course. And so please just join me now. Thank you for being here, and join me in thanking Amit, Ophelia, Zack, and Hila. Thank you.
Thank you.